Okay, 3 bets for Saturday. 14 to 1 treble, all away wins, 2 of them in the early kickoffs. And I will say as well that the schedule's played a big part in my thinking this weekend. It's been a 3-game week in the EFL. Managers persistently talk about that 3rd game in 8 days, and how difficult it is to, manage your resources over, these congested periods. So we'll start with Leeds to win away at Sheffield Wednesday. They're 11 to 10. That's a televised game on Sky at just after midday. And my thinking here is quite straightforward. I think Leeds dominate games to such an extent. 70% plus XG ratio. Whether it's first half, second half, home at Ellen Road or away from home, they just dominate across the board. Almost every single game they play, they dominate from start to finish. And when you're that sort of team, I think it can be. You don't want to be the team that has to defend against that in your 3rd game for in the space of a week. Wednesday do have the advantage of having played last Friday night, so their 3 games have been stretched over a slightly longer time period. But I'm not totally convinced as far as the market's gone with them. They've played a lot of weak opposition in recent weeks, and I don't think they've played too many pressing teams either. So I think that this will be a bit more of a stretch for the Owls. I don't think they're necessarily equipped for this kind of challenge. They have, this is a squad packed full of seasoned Championship campaigners. Was concerns that they were going stale last season, but a succession of new managers have come in with new ideas, and they've bought into each one, and it's kind of reinvigorated them a little bit each time. And the same's happening now under Gary Monk. But like I say, I think they've played a lot of weak opposition, and we're not really sure what extent they're at yet. They were fortunate to beat Stoke 1-0 in midweek. It was a very, very tight game, but again, it was the game management that got them through. They got a goal. It was a 0-0 sort of game. They got a goal just before half time, and then managed the second half brilliantly from that position. I think this could be a different story altogether, though. I think Leeds are going to test them like they've not been tested at all by anybody since Monk came into the club. It's worth saying that Monk did beat Leeds twice last season with Birmingham. I don't think that's an advantage. If anything, I think that gives Marcelo Bielsa tons of information to work with. He'll recognise the patterns from those 2 matches. I don't think Monk is the sort of manager that, pulls magic tricks from up his sleeve when it comes to tactics. I think, he's very much a template manager. I don't think the Wednesday squad is a squad that are liable to spring massive surprises from a tactical standpoint. So I think this will be quite straightforward. I think Bielsa will have learnt lessons from last season and them 2 defeats against Birmingham. He'll obviously know everything about Sheffield Wednesday. He knows everything about everyone. And I just think that this is... Leeds played 3 games in 8 days in August time. The 3rd game they went to Stoke and won easily 3-0. I just think, when you're a team that has so much of the ball, that they're the teams you want to be backing in the 3rd game of a tough, punishing week. So Leeds at 11 to 10 is the first leg. Second leg is Doncaster, also 11 to 10. They're away at Tranmere. And they've, in the last 7 days, they've beaten Bristol Rovers at home. Basically, to put it into context, 2 weeks ago they went to Oxford. I backed them at Oxford. They didn't do themselves justice on the day. Darren Moore said afterwards, it's the first time I can say this season we've let ourselves down. We haven't really, come up to scratch on the day. And he was wanting a reaction against Bristol Rovers last week. He got it, utterly dominant. It was something like 60% possession, over 60% possession. Absolutely sort of strolled the XG battle and won the game 2-0. And then midweek went to Southend, found themselves behind early, but behind against 10 men. But basically they played almost the entire game against 10 men, and then for a large chunk of the second half they've been against 9 men. Ended up winning the game 7-1. It's been an absolute stroll for them. Loads of possession, loads of chances, some real slick football, people waxing lyrical about the type of football they've been playing in the last 2 matches. Confidence should be sky high now. They won't be kidded by the fact that they've been against weak opposition, but, certainly in the case of the Southend game. But I just think it's a nice game to go into. And again here this weekend they play Tranmere, a team I don't particularly rate at all. I think if it wasn't for the problems, with Berry going out of business, and the problems that Bolton have had, then I think Tranmere would be in real trouble. I think they're the team most likely to benefit from the fact that there's been all these issues in League One. If they stay up, it will be mainly because of what has gone on elsewhere and not because of the standards that Tranmere are setting. Mickey Mellon spoke after the 1-1 draw with Southend last weekend. That was on a Friday night, and he spoke afterwards about the fact he wouldn't go into detail. He was very cryptic about it, but I think there's very clear problems defensively that are, he wasn't going to elaborate and just give the game away. He wants opponents to at least work it out for themselves, but I think there's problems that he's really struggling to solve defensively, and the XG numbers would appear to back it up. They're routinely conceding around 2 goals worth of XG per game, and not always against great sides. I think the results they've picked up lately they've been in the right place at the right time. They came from behind to beat Burton 2-1 with 2 stoppage time goals at the end of a game where the midweek Burton had gone to Portsmouth absolutely under the cosh for the best part of 90 minutes. They went 2-0 up early, spent the majority of the game playing with 10 men, and were really sort of given a good going over. Had to settle for a 2-2 draw in that game, and there was real concerns about their fitness levels. They've gone to Tranmere and for 90 minutes with a much the better side, 1-0 up, and then just completely crumbled in stoppage time and lost 2-1. So although that looks a great result on paper, for me it's not something that you should be attaching to Tranmere as a positive. They were so close to getting nothing from a game where it was all set up for them, a big rest advantage. I think real concerns about Tranmere. I just don't particularly rate them at all. And I think Doncaster at the moment, full of confidence and some real interesting reports. I already had them down before the Oxford game when they disappointed. I already had them down as possibly the most underrated side in League One, and that they were setting some really good standards. The last 2 performances, although the opposition is questionable, have probably been the best 2 performances of the season in terms of attacking fluidity and cohesion. So I think that because the midweek game was such a stroll, I think they can go to Tranmere and they can dictate terms. And I think there's at least 1, probably 2 goals in this for Doncaster. And I just think it's there for them from an attacking sense against Tranmere's defence. I think Doncaster would have to do something really wrong in the game management to not take maximum points. So that's 2 11-10 shots, and then to bump it up, my third one's 12-5, and it's Plymouth to win away at Exeter. Again, we'll start with the schedule. In this case, Exeter went to Cambridge last weekend, went to Scunthorpe midweek. They're 2 long trips to be doing in the space of 7 days. They were beaten 4-0 at Cambridge, and they were beaten 3-1 at Scunthorpe. It's not so much the results that concern me, it's the type of team they are and the fact that they spent so long in both games chasing. Even before you consider the travelling that they've done and the logistics and everything like that, it's not ideal going into a Devon derby where passions are going to be running high. It's going to be a real intense battle. I think Matt Taylor would rather a football game didn't break out in this, and that it was a game of fine margins, and then he'd fancy his team to take one big chance when it comes along. I don't think that's the type of game it's going to be. I think Plymouth as a team, they go away from home and they like to play like the home side. They really take the game to the opposition. Some very high XG encounters when they go on the road. And they've had a really comfortable week. 2-0 winners against Carlisle last weekend. 4-0 winners against Leyton Orient in midweek. They've been in cruise control and not left Devon. Exeter, by contrast, have made 2 long journeys and spent most of those games chasing. Taylor's spoken about, he's very much about what happens in both penalty boxes. He's very much about his players seizing big, opportunities when they do come along. Don't waste them. And they've kind of fell into the same trap in both these last 2 away games where they've gone 1-0 down, and then they've really, they've tried to force the issue to get themselves back into the game, and they're normally quite good at staying in games when they go behind. But I think these last 2 games have not gone their way at all, and whether it affects confidence or not, I'm not sure. But again, if Plymouth were to take the lead in this game, I think there'd be real concerns about Exeter in that scenario, whereas previously they normally find a way to get they can be patient at the same time as, you know, forcing, like trying to probe for the equalisers. But I think they've seen the other side of the coin now of being a team that doesn't necessarily dominate the middle of the park, but makes it count in both penalty boxes. When they're not making it count in the opposition penalty box, and when they're trying to force the issue too much, you know, they've probably seen a side of themselves now that's probably not, yeah, maybe dented the confidence a little. Either way, Plymouth, by contrast, have had a breeze of a week. They should be right at it for a local derby, and I expect them to make the running in the game, even as the away side. I think 12-5 is just a huge price, all things considered. You know, at the start of the season, it would have been a surprise to get this price, put it that way. I think Exeter, we know what Exeter are about, and I think they'll keep coming back, and they'll keep having patches of form where, you know, that I do expect them to be in and among the top three for most of the season. But I think Plymouth we're yet to see the best of. I think they'll get progressively better as the season goes on. So I'm not too inclined to be concerned by earlier season form. So a big patch of the data that we're working with so far early in the season, I think Plymouth will just get progressively better as the season goes on, just as Bury did under Ryan Lowe last season. So I think 12-5 is a good price given the conditions and the circumstances leading into this game. So that's Leeds at 11-10, Doncaster at 11-10, and Plymouth at 12-5. 3 away wins. The treble pays 14-1.